My name is Saskia. Today I will be discussing the role of textiles as an instrument for feminist resistance and self-expression through the work of two contemporary artists, Daisy Collingridge and Michaela Stark. I'm really interested in the historic undervaluing of textiles within the art hierarchy due to its associations with domesticity and women's work, which is why I chose this topic as a starting point within my research. So someone that has explored this idea at length is Rosika Parker in her book, The Subversive Stitch. She discusses how stitching can serve as a tool for female resistance and argues that despite its undervaluation, stitchwork has long been a medium for women to express themselves, build narratives and protest. Julia Skelly further discusses the subversive potential of textiles within female art in her book Radical Decadence, which is a key framework within my investigation. She discusses how women creating art in the medium of textiles or ceramics, while showcasing female excess, are in turn engaging in a liberating feminine aesthetic. She describes excess to be anything that sits outside of what society deems acceptable for women, so things like drinking too much alcohol, taking drugs, eating too much, and expressing pleasure and sexuality. I'll be focusing on this theory in the context of textiles as a medium and excess in terms of the female body, specifically larger bodies that hold associations with overconsumption. Another key text within my research is The Female Grotesque by Mary Rousseau. She discusses how we can disrupt traditional representations of femininity by embracing bodily excess, and in turn, this can act as a tool for women to assert agency and resist objectification. So I have looked at two female artists practicing today, Daisy Collingridge and Michaela Stark, whose work that I feel challenges societal norms surrounding femininity and beauty. I aim to show that the combination of medium and subject within their work, whether intentional or not, challenges patriarchal ideologies by showcasing bodies society affiliated with overconsumption, alongside utilising textile crafts which have historically been associated with women's work and thus overlooked in art discourse. In Radical Decadence, Julia Skelly says that the use of craft materials such as fibre is a radical artistic and ideological act, primarily due to the history interwoven within textiles as an art form associated with feminine domesticity. This association with craft and textiles as a domestic way of working, and in turn its lack of value within art hierarchies, has enabled women to utilise textiles to act as a radical way of expressing themselves, building narrative and protesting, thus subverting the way textile crafts have traditionally been seen. A good example of this is the use of embroidery within the women's suffrage movement. In The Subversive Stitch, Rosika Parker writes, "Far from desiring to disentangle embroidery and femininity, they wanted embroidery to evoke femininity, but femininity represented as a source of strength, not as evidence of women's weakness. Through this, we can see that textiles hold a deeply embedded feminine symbolism that pertains to oppression, but also liberation, and therefore textiles can act as a powerful tool for feminist self-expression." Daisy Collingridge is a contemporary artist predominantly working in textiles, and she describes her work as sitting in an awkward space between sculpture, performance and art. She chooses to investigate themes of the human body within her practice and creates wearable sculptures that are exaggerations of the human form, which she calls squishies. They are playful depictions of large bodies, but where large female bodies are generally perceived as a source of shame or repressed desire, Collingridge shows the squishies in a state of joy, hugging, dancing, and just generally being comfortable with their squish. On the other hand, some people's perceptions of her sculptures is that they personify internal shaming around body image. A Time Out review of her solo exhibition last year said, "They're vast exaggerations of negative inner thoughts, all those terrible things that you say to yourself in the mirror made flesh." I disagree with this, though, and think that their visual curation personifies joy, and the dialogue around internalised shame is likely to relate to societal discourse around larger bodies, rather than the intention of the artist, who herself said they neither promote or demote one body type. The idea that there even is an ideal body type is ridiculous. Body image plays an intrinsic role within Michaela Stark's work. She's an artist and couture designer who creates corsetry and lingerie designed to highlight and enhance parts of the body perceived as imperfect by society. She uses her own body as a starting point for design, sculpting and manipulating, pushing and pulling her flesh to create new and interesting shapes, which she then predominantly models herself. The majority of her creations are adaptations of traditional corsets, and of course corsets are historically loaded garments in relation to femininity and women's bodies. Valerie Steele remarks that corsetry is widely acknowledged to have been a means by which women were controlled and their sexuality exploited by patriarchal society. In the Victorian era, the corset's function was to restrict and constrain parts of the body, the waist mainly, whilst accentuating other parts, like the breasts and hips, using tight lacing techniques to create an exaggerated hourglass figure. Stark's pieces utilise the same techniques as traditional corsets, but the intended shapes and proportions they create are very different, choosing to distort her body to an almost grotesque extent. In doing this, she acts to subvert beauty standards related to traditional ways in which the corset and other shape-forming garments have and are used. She acknowledges and accentuates the societally perceived excess of her body, and by doing this finds a liberating approach to garment construction that celebrates her body, as she puts it, and as she puts it, makes her fat something to be desired. Through this subversion of corset wearing, she's resisting historical representations of the female body, which Skelly notes to be a key feature within the work that she describes within Radical Decadence. Mary Russo discusses how exaggerated representations of women and their bodies can act to challenge expectations and norms regarding femininity. The female grotesque, as she calls it, then becomes a form of rebellion against limiting representations of women. She describes the grotesque body as opposed to the classical body, which is monumental, static, closed and sleek, and instead is unruly, protruding, oozing. These are all descriptors that I feel could be used to describe the bodies created by Daisy Collingridge. They're visceral, the flesh she creates is obtrusive and bulging, the breast sagging, the skin drooping and flapping in different directions. They're certainly opposed to the classical body that Rousseau describes. Similarly, Stark's use of corsetry to exaggerate her body leads to flesh that swells bulbously in parts that should be smooth and level. In Stark's case, perhaps the extent to which her body is accentuated isn't as extreme as the bodies created by Collingridge, though that's not to say they aren't extreme in a societal context. And some people have found her rebellious approach to body distortion uncomfortable. Some Instagram users have reported Stark's account as violating community standards, leading to Instagram repeatedly removing her posts and threatening to take down her account entirely. The way she expresses herself through the manipulation of her body challenges prevailing beauty standards that prioritise thinness and the classical body, in turn aligning with Rousseau's idea that the female grotesque can function as a mode of social and political commentary. Stark collaborated with Victoria's Secret last year, reimagining the idea of the Victoria's Secret's angel. Through the use of her work, styled with archival garments from past Victoria's Secret shows, her idea was to reframe the concept of fantasy in a modern context, reinforcing and promoting the fact that fantasy is not conventional and fantasy is not limited to one kind of beauty. The backlash for Stark on social media was immediate. There were almost 6,500 comments, and the majority circled around the size of Stark's and the other two models' bodies, and connections were made to them being unhealthy and eating too much. Skelly wrote, like decadence, the term excess has often been used to shame, and/or control that which threatens the social order. In this context, we can see that Stark's work and portrayal of her body and the plus-size models she works alongside are seen as a threat to the social order within the Victoria's Secret community. Larger women should not be allowed to enter the space of Victoria's Secret's lingerie. Their bodies are too big, they eat too much. This in turn has led to outward shaming by members within the community. I've pulled out one comment that reads, "I love how we've forgotten that the creator expressed over and over how he was not interested in putting the bigger girls in and on the runway. We parade some plus-size models around in Victoria's Secret and boom, it's all forgotten." I find it interesting that this comment focuses on a man's perception of what types of bodies are allowed to be displayed wearing his work, and that these perceived opinions of a man in the mid-1970s can justify somebody's thoughts around showcasing larger women on Victoria's Secret's platform today. To me, this shows the importance of Michaela Stark's work in showing a different female beauty to the skinny, perfect one that stems from male-centric opinions that are still entrenched within women's psyches today. Stark uses herself as a canvas to work through personal issues surrounding body image. She says that her work was born out of her own obsessions with the body and acts as a vessel for her to direct this energy to help herself heal. She also discusses that this issue not only affects her, but is ingrained into the way many women think about their bodies. She says that we are taught what is beautiful about the body from a young age, and we're told which parts we should be hiding away because, according to God knows who, apparently they're super ugly. This take on beauty and what makes it is complex and difficult to unpack, but I would argue that it stems back to male-centric narratives around what characterises the perfect woman and in turn the perfect female body. Making the personal political is a topic discussed at length by bell hooks. What this means in this context is that our individual experiences are not isolated. Instead, they're connected to larger societal structures which shape our lives. By acknowledging and understanding these connections, we can challenge and transform the systems of power and oppression that affect us. So Stark's work challenges beauty norms within a wide societal context by showcasing her struggles, subverting the meaning of what it is to make her body beautiful, and discussing this for an audience to see, thus making the personal political. To conclude, Collingridge and Stark's work, whether intentional or not, showcase feminine resistance and self-expression through textiles. Their work aligns with the principles of radical decadence, which is rooted in the notion that in the hands of women, textiles can be a radical means of feminine expression and production, and discusses the transformative potential of female excess when expressed through textiles, in essence through their choice of medium, themes of excess, and challenges to conventional beauty standards. These artists contribute to broader conversations about the intersectionality of textile art, reclaiming agency of the body and challenging societal norms around beauty. Their works connect with and bring together a variety of feminist theories, and particularly through the lens of radical decadence, we can see that their work showcases feminine rebellion and self-expression within the realm of contemporary art. Thank you.